supervisory authority, and he's going to explain it.
Correct. It's working. Hello. I'm coming from EIOPA. EIOPA is the insurance regulator in Europe. It's the one that is on charge of the insurance sector. Just to introduce myself, I am the project manager of the ex-viral project, let's say, for data collection for the insurance, for the Solvency II call regulation. That is the one that is has harmonized the data collection in Europe for the insurance sector. Just by chance, I studied here. 20 years ago, I was one of the chairs, but much younger. I'm engineer of ICAI, and I have seen, and I recall that for me was today, let's say, a special day because I can see how much the world has changed in 20 years. When I joined here, there was not internet, there were not mobile phones. I was studying, and at the end of this was my first degree, and at the end of my second degree, I did the project, the final the final dissertation about the peer-to-peer. This is when I started. There were no mobile phones. At the end, there were peer-to-peer. And when I'm seeing how the data itself and how the technology is changing the world, I think that there will be in the next 20 years a huge revolution. Today we are speaking, or I have heard a lot about blockchains. There was also a little bit about quantum computing that could, I think, change the world. Quantum computing only have few use cases, but within these use cases can have huge difference on performance. We are speaking about millions and millions and millions of times of faster computing, and this means that all the things that we have today encrypted will be plain text. You need to take care of it. Whatever you have today encrypt, and if it's public, will be plain text. There is one more thing that I would like to mention that for me is interesting, and we were speaking today about trends, and is the homomorphic databases, and this is related with let's say one of the use cases could be the public disclosure of data. Homomorphic databases are databases that you can share and are having two main benefits, and is that they are never unencrypted. Let's say that you can ensure that the data itself that you are querying, this is in very early stages, but the data that you are querying is never encrypted on the chain. I mean, at CPU level, when you are, let's say, aggregating or computing data within the database, there is not plain text in any of the levels till the end, really big end of the user. And this will permit, for example, that you put in a company, put all the assets of the company in a database, ensuring that no one can check or never seen the assets. However, for example, can work with aggregate and can say, okay, I want to check to sum up all the assets, and then can see the plain text, but never can access to the granular data. This is something that probably will come much later, but it's something that is moving up and may change the world as could be Bitcoin and so on and so forth. I think it's very difficult to say on the terms of the DataSphere where we will be, but it's clear already nowadays that the data is moving the world. It's the access to data and how the data is processed is giving the big benefits on the market. I have to say that in financial reporting, and is the narrow space where I'm working just now, we are still working in let's say in a silo. We're still working in something that when you look with this kind of eye, you say, okay, what we are doing is something like, I would say, early 2000 technology. However, I think that will be a big change also on the financial regulations on the next 10, 15 years. We saw change that I agree with BU, for example, on the slot. If we are not in this stream, we will lose the opportunity because it will not wait for us. We cannot resist, and this I think that was more or less my brief overview that I want to say today.
Okay, I agree that we will not be able to resist. That's for sure. Now I give the word to Dirk. Dirk, I think Dirk is a genius, really.
Well, thank you very much for the compliment. I can confirm that this is not the case at all.
Yes, it's the case, but intellect, he's going to speak to us about intellect for many reasons and so on.
Well, I had the opportunity yesterday to run a workshop on blockchain, and you may have understood that we are very much into the private permission blockchain space, which is a space which is differently developing from the traditional open permission blockchain, with the notion that there is no cryptocurrency usage in the processing of data and transactions in the private permissioned, although you can also implement that there as well. To say a few words about myself as an introduction, so I have a former background in IBM and then in Belgacom, which is a telecom operator, and later on I founded Intellect companies, with several companies in the meantime, and the reason why I'm sitting here is mainly because over the last 10 years we have been very practically developing and using and making and implementing software that does all what was discussed so far here. So we take standards, we map them to other standards, we do mappings, transformations, transliterations, whatever. We have developed our own pieces of software for that to make it easier for any organization, whether it's in RegTech, InsurTech, FinTech, whatever tech, financial tech, to do these mappings and transformations. So that's one part of it. We have integrated and we've worked a lot with ISO 20022 over the past years, in the sense that we just take it as a given and then we process whatever information is contained within the ISO 20022 messages. And recently we are trying to see and to bridge between ISO 20022 and whatever comes as new technology in blockchain. So we use these messages or these transactions or these pieces of information, whatever it is. It should not necessarily be ISO 20022, it can be any other standards. And we use this as triggers to execute smart contracts on blockchains. So we're doing the marriage between old world and new world. And again, we are very practical, feet on the ground people. We're engineers, we're not lawyers. Very often we don't really understand what the lawyers come up with, but whatever lawyers or regulators come up with, we try just to implement with technology. That's our positioning. Very basic, feet on the ground, doing coding, testing it and making it work. That's our positioning. So in the meantime, we have grown as an organization, which we founded a few years ago in different regions. So we have positions in Mexico, New York, in Eastern Europe, Ukraine, and in Lisbon, where the people are actively working on everything that we have been discussing so far. This geographical spread gives us the opportunity to take the latest news and information and technological developments from the United States, which is on the one hand San Francisco, on the other hand New York. So we learn a lot there, and then we take the plane, literally. It's an 8-hour flight. We land in Europe, and we can use that knowledge over here in the different projects. Now to the topic of today. I was 100% in line with Mirek in terms of his vision on the bottom-up approach, on initiatives like schema.org that really have the capability to structure this whole field of which is the topic of these 2 days conferences. Not so much a believer in this top-down approach, because in the past we've been working a lot on theoretical exercises that we hoped would come to the field. It never happened. And then you need the self-structuring and the self-regulation discipline of a number of big actors to bring together the people that are active in this space to come up with a bottom-up approach. So if you ask my opinion about it, it's just my opinion, the bottom-up approach leads to really practical results. Then again, referring to the things that we are doing, these practical results, we can actually use them very practically in real code, real projects, and real implementations, which is what I want to stress. Not to make too much theoretical approaches, but be very practical with the big players on the globe and implement these solutions in the newest technology. You were working with year 2000 technology. Well, we're working with 2017 technology, and potentially we try to co-develop the 2020 technology at this moment. What it exactly will be, we don't know, but it's a passion to be in this space and to help to work on that. So I think given the fact that this is very much in line, we can help you too, by the way, with technology. This is the space where this cooperation and this forum may be useful to bring those parties together to get it really concretely going in real code, real cases, real projects, and real implementations. And as far as we are concerned, again, we're engineers, it has to go fast, so we're not very happy with things that will happen in 2025. Let's look at what is there today and how can we make it work today.
Okay, thank you, Dirk. I would like now to initiate the debate, firstly, I would like to ask Merrick if he feels that the bottom-up approach, which seems preferable to Dirk, may fail in the sense of utilitarianism and in the sense of relativist risks. You know.
Good question, actually.
because to gain consensus on permission blockchains, for instance, we need to put some order. No? I don't know if theoretical or make taxonomical upper approach up on top.
Well, I used to believe.
But I mean, with feet on the ground, as you said too. I think maybe to put some. Personal or no-spherical order in all of this.
Well, it's very hard, first and foremost, to use this no-spherical order because we still don't know really what it is, okay? We live in that and we perceive that very much, but it's very hard to conceptualize, okay? So coming back to the reality more of the bottom-up and top-down, what I actually believe strongly, and that's what I'm very thankful that you mentioned it there, is that bottom-up approach is applicable to multiple scenarios, and I don't believe that there is this danger because as long we go with people who are trustworthy in this community, and if you look how schema is organized, I mean, I have no time to explain that, how it works, this communal process of building it, there is a lot of trust indeed in that, so I don't believe on any kind of, utilitarian approaches. There were some attempts, and I touched even slightly some people who wanted to promote something that was very much theirs, okay? But there are some other counter movements that blocked that or neutralized and so on and so forth. So I'm not very much concerned about that, and I strongly feel that this is the best approach in the current world. However, when I said about this top-down, I said specifically on specific applications. And in this,
like XBRL?
not very much, because when we speak about XBRL, XBRL is used in a different way. I mean, so there is a different approach to XBRL when you are somebody who defines SBR in a given country, like in Australia right now, right, or in New Zealand and Netherlands. And there is a different approach to XBRL when you are accompanied to file some report. Okay, so there is two different approaches. And I think that in this space, I feel that more or less we need more of the bottom-up approach rather than top-down, also because of failures of the past of these big taxonomies. However, in this presentation of, I guess, Peter yesterday, right, who was on Skype, we clearly heard that there is a process of trying to make regulation less costly for participants by define one's approach, right, and report one's approach. At that moment, you need to be very precise and you need to be very concerned about the fundamental structure of concepts and taxonomy that you use to build that kind of the approach. And this approach will never go to the very wide adoption because it will be between regulators and basically companies that can afford for a little bit more advanced knowledge engineering. So I have faith in both approaches. However, in my opinion, they must be applied to proper fields. So for example, if you try to build the language for fundamental financial institutions over the world to describe their products, bottom-up is the way to go. And you can go to schema.org, to documentation, go to bank and financial institutions. You can see what we delivered under the name of finance-schema.org and this finance extension. Okay, this was totally bottom-up approach where we defined the literally part of a language how to describe financial products, how to identify bank using LEI and all these things. So this is this place. However, when you do that in a different way, when you define the taxonomy, I think that the knowledge engineering of a higher quality that is today represented mostly by those who create upper ontologies is still of value. And I didn't lost my trust in that approaches. However, we need to look where to apply that. What is the scope? If we try to go everywhere, we will fail. But if we go to that part of the development, like a building taxonomy, good taxonomy that has a clear structure for regulators, I would really advise to knock the door of some of these people I mentioned, Nicola Guarino, Barry Smith, maybe people from Leipzig who built the GFO before, General Formal Ontology, and other attempts like this, because that represents the logical structure of knowledge in such zones that may still apply.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think that explains at least partly the success of the sandboxes regulatory, because they ask people what their essays and errors have produced to better improvements of regulation. I would like now to ask Aitor, what does he think about InsurTech consolidation? If you look at the slide in the fourth point in InsurTech advances, I don't mean, when I have written virtual policies, I didn't mean policies in terms of directions sued by public administrations. I just meant the document, the policy, the insurance policy, a virtual policy as a tokenized or tokenizable asset. No? Do you agree that this is possible in practice, to virtualize all those assets and with the possible help of IoT devices in a medium-term?
Difficult to say for me. I'm not.
What are your expectations from?
Yeah, I mean, difficult to say how it will evolve. I fully agree, for example, on one of the that it was this morning, that the financial sector itself will change. Whatever we know now on how the policies are working in the future, doesn't need to be like that. I mean, we are speaking about probably a short future. And this, let's say, is my answer, because I'm not fully sure there. I'm not a visionary. But touching upon your point, because it was very interesting for me, and also on the Peter that mentioned yesterday about the fines ones. On that, yeah, I have more strong opinion, let's say, to share, and I'm not fully sure that that for me is let's say, the main challenge or the main goal to achieve to define ones, but to have a common dictionary where you have different acceptions. I think it's not so important that, and I will put an example. In EIOPA, we are doing now the regulation not only for the EIOPA itself, but also for the ECB on the pension funds. And it's the second phase. We first harmonize the insurance. We have also a model for ECB. And now we are doing the pension funds. The pension funds in ECB, the definition of bond is slightly different than the insurance and need to be different. That's not a big problem. The problem from the user and the reporting perspective is to be able to realize that this difference exists and that it's clear for him that the difference exists. Because the other, in my point of view, when you speak about the fine one, you are going almost to the natural language. In the natural language, there is not only one definition. And then, for me, it's more the point to...
It's polymorphic.
It's polymorphic. Then for me, it's more, maybe on the schema.org that you are saying, it's more to stabilize the mechanisms, to have a common dictionary way to identify the difference.
Yes, exactly. And then the schema is polymorphic because of that situation.
And I think when Peter is trying to, let's say, consolidate, is more thinking that we are going to have in all the financial sector the same words for the same concepts, and this is a little bit, let's say, over technology at this point, I think. Not only the technology scope.
Would you like to say something?
Yes, so you had difficulties in replying to the virtual policies, as it's called here. I suppose you mean the contracts, right? Insurance contracts. So in this, again, permission blockchain space, there's a lot of initiatives going on to see how you can translate a real insurance contract, I would not call it policy, but a contract, into smart contracts. And then it's more like, what do you define like a smart contract and so on and so forth. To make it simple, there is within insurance organizations thousands and millions of paper-based insurance agreements that are potentially being translated into code, which you can call smart contracts in whatever form that you can come up with, which then become more easy to manage, to control, to supervise, to make inventory, and so on. And the difficulty now is, how do you bring written real language contracts, how do you translate them into code-based contracts? And this is a whole field of research, I think, that's going on to make what is now written in a contract in a specific language, Spanish, German, English, how to put it into the enforceable on the blockchain, as we discussed yesterday with all the features of blockchain, enforceable contracts on a code, which is smart contract code. You can never say that a smart contract is a smart version of a traditional contract because it's different concepts, but you see where the link could be placed, that you make something enforceable on a private permission blockchain that today is just at the will of people acting in this space. It becomes like a transaction on the blockchain. So virtual policies with online supervision. The aspect of online supervision, I have no clue about that. That's the regulator who will have to enforce it. But from technology standpoint, again, this is very interesting field of research to bring all these legacy old contracts onto the blockchain. And the other thing was, when you go to connect this with IoT, of course, as technologists, it's fantastic what's happening today. If a car crashes before you even know it yourself, because you're lying like a dead body there, your insurance company is already informed about it, and the contracts on the blockchain start to get executed. And that contract could be like inform the hospital, inform insurance company, inform the police, take action for potential claims that will come, and so on and so forth. And this is the passion of the technological possibilities that are there. And what is written here in point 4, insert tech consolidation, there's going to be a big thing happening in that space.
Yeah, of course, there can even more. Imagine that you are still in hospital and your money for the hospital expenses already back in your reimbursed in your current account, even even when you are still blind or with a broken leg. That may be
this is a bit dreaming, of course, but potentially this is what it is about.
But I would like to make a precision, but it's professional deformation, of course. When I write policy, I mean not the document, the contract, as you said before, because the policy is the contract, but it's a double-faced concept. Because on one side it's a contract, but on the agreement of wills or accordance of wills, but on the other hand, it's a document that contains credit rights, and that's a much different thing, because it's like a sharing in a quoted company. There is the document which is itself negotiable, like today an electronic balance sheet or anything, and you can translate it into tokens. So the token will be the future concept containing what we traditionally called credit rights. But it has also proof and judicial and probatory function to be developed, but it's in parallel. So you can negotiate it because it incorporates credit rights, and at the same time it may serve you to go on ahead with legal proceedings. But the policy has both functions, because the policy itself, at least in continental Latin systems, is a document which is negotiable itself, like a bill of exchange, for instance, or a bond. But so we have. It's true that we have to produce the documentation and we have to create the correspondence between the traditional document and the smart contract. But also we have to permit, and that's a big task of regulators, to permit the incorporation of rights to the token, and we are working on it by this time. There are few people in the MIT working on that, or two. And now I would like to give the word to other speakers in the audience. Would anyone want to direct something to any one of them in particular? Or? I cannot believe there are no questions. Maybe it's a bit late. It's too late.
It's
and
just
it's half of an hour
skip
gap.
the coffee time. We are now to go to skip the lunchtime, so that's probably a reason.
Maybe this ontological and approaches are too
heavy.
Too heavy for
with empty stomachs.
Yes.
Okay.
Does anyone say something? Otherwise, I declare my panel closed, and I want to thank you all, your collaboration. See you later after lunch.